My name is Evelyn Rodriguez, and I am 34 years old. Right now, I am standing on the second floor balcony of the Grand Plaza Hotel in Miami, looking down at the red carpet. Below me, my mother Isabella is screaming at a man named Davis, the head of hotel security. Her face is flushed, her designer dress is snagged on a velvet rope, and she is demanding to be let into the Alumni of the Decade award ceremony. My ceremony. Davis is holding a laminated blacklist with her name at the very top. I put it there. She looks up and sees me standing by the railing. She screams that I owe her. I do not flinch. I just signal Davis to call the police. If you have ever had a toxic family member demand gratitude for the trauma they caused, you know exactly why I am not opening that door. Welcome to Luke Vengeance. Before we get into how I audited my family out of my life, take a second to hit subscribe, drop a like, and let me know your age and where you are listening from in the comments. I read every single one. Now let me take you back 16 years to the day my mother locked me out of my own high school graduation. It was a Tuesday in late May. The air in our house felt thick, the kind of Florida humidity that makes it hard to breathe even with the central cooling running. I was 18. I had spent the last 4 years studying until my vision blurred, earning the title of valedictorian. My cap and gown hung on the back of my bedroom door. My valedictorian stole the gold sash I had worked so hard for, was draped over my desk chair. I was standing in front of my mirror adjusting the tassel when my mother walked in. She held a few sheets of loose-leaf paper, the draft of my graduation speech. I had printed it that morning. I wrote about the late nights, the teachers who stayed after school to help me with calculus, and the community that supported our class. She dropped the papers on my bed. The sound was soft, but it felt like a slap. "You are not reading this," she said. Her voice did not shake. It was perfectly level. I turned around. The dark fabric of my graduation gown brushed against the doorframe. I asked her what she meant. "You barely mention me, Evelyn. One sentence. After the sacrifices I made for you to go to that school, after the money we spent, this is the return on my investment. You sound like an ungrateful narcissist." I tried to explain that the speech was meant for the graduating class, not a dedication to her. She did not want to hear it. She walked over to my desk, picked up my gold valedictorian stole, and folded it over her arm. Then she grabbed the keys to my used Honda from my nightstand. "You are having a mental breakdown," she said, looking right through me. "The stress of being valedictorian was just too much for your fragile state. That is what I am going to tell the principal. You are staying right here until you learn respect." She walked out and pulled the door shut. A second later, I heard the heavy deadbolt slide into place. The lock she had installed on the outside of my door when I was 12. I ran to the door and turned the knob. It was solid brass. It did not give. I stood there in my graduation gown and listened to her heels click down the hallway. I heard the front door open and close. I heard the engine of her SUV start and fade down the street. She went to the ceremony. She sat in the audience without me and accepted the sympathy of the other parents playing the tragic mother of a troubled daughter. My chest felt tight, but I did not cry. Crying was a currency my mother fed on, and I refused to spend another dime on her. An hour later, I took off the gown. I noticed my wastebasket in the corner of the room. My speech draft was shoved inside. She had crumpled the pages and poured half a cup of cold coffee over them before tossing them out. I reached into the trash and pulled out the wet papers. The ink was bleeding, but the words were still there. I took them to my desk. I smoothed out every wrinkle, pressing the heel of my hand against the damp paper until it laid flat. I opened my bottom drawer and pulled out a blank red accounting ledger I had bought for a college finance class. I opened to the first page. I took a glue stick and attached the stained speech to the inside cover. Right then, I stopped being a daughter. I became an auditor. I picked up a black pen and made my first entry. 2 days after the graduation ceremony I did not attend, I packed my life into 3 black, heavy-duty garbage bags. Suitcases were for people who planned to come back for visits. Garbage bags were for things you intended to discard. My mother stood in the kitchen drinking espresso, pretending I was not dragging my childhood down the hallway. My older sister Sophia was outside in the driveway. Through the living room window, I could see her tracing her manicured fingernails over the hood of a brand new silver BMW. A graduation gift, my mother had called it. Sophia had not graduated from a university. She had completed a 6-week online real estate licensing course, passing on her 3rd attempt. For that C-average effort, she received a luxury vehicle. For maintaining a perfect GPA and earning a full academic scholarship to Florida State University, I received the lock on the outside of my door. The disparity was not an accident. It was the business model of our family. Sophia was the marketing department, the glossy exterior my mother paraded around the country club to prove our success. I was the liability, the daughter who asked too many questions and refused to perform. I dragged the last bag out the front door. The Florida heat hit me instantly, making the plastic stick to my legs. My friend Clara was waiting in her beat-up Toyota Civic. The trunk popped open. My father Hector was standing on the porch holding a garden hose, pretending to water a patch of impatiens that were already drowning. He had spent his entire marriage perfecting the art of looking busy when conflict arrived. He was an architect by trade, a man who designed foundations for a living, but he had never built one for his own children. He was terrified of Isabella. He navigated our home like a man walking through a minefield. His primary goal, simply to survive another day without triggering her wrath. I walked past him toward Clara Carr. I did not expect a goodbye. He kept his eyes on the dirt, the water pooling around his boots. As I lifted the heavy bag into the trunk, he suddenly stepped forward. He moved fast with a jerky, nervous energy, checking the kitchen window over his shoulder to ensure Isabella was not watching. He reached out and grabbed my jacket. I froze. He did not hug me. He did not say he was sorry about the graduation. He did not tell me he was proud. Instead, he shoved his hand into my right pocket. His fingers were cold and damp from the hose. He pulled his hand back, quickly nodded once at the pavement, and turned back to the impatiens. I got into the passenger seat of Clara's car. The engine sputtered to life, and we pulled out of the driveway. I did not look back at the house. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out what my father had left there. It was a $50 bill crumpled into a tight little square. I sat holding the damp money as the suburbs of Miami rolled past the window. My father, a man who earned a 6-figure salary, had just funded his daughter's college departure with the exact amount you might give a teenager for a weekend at the mall. It was a pathetic gesture, the financial equivalent of a whisper in a hurricane. But looking at Abraham Lincoln, face creased and folded, I realized something critical. That $50 was not support. It was an admission of guilt. He knew the ledger was unbalanced. He knew what Isabella was doing was wrong, and this was his cowardly way of paying off his conscience. I did not put the money in my wallet. I opened my backpack, pulled out the red ledger, and placed the bill flat against the inside cover, right next to the coffee-stained graduation speech. It was the first physical asset in my new accounting system. The drive to Tallahassee took 7 hours. I watched the palm trees give way to the pine forests of northern Florida. I was traveling toward a university where I had no safety net, no parents to co-sign a lease, no emergency fund for textbooks, no one to call if I got sick. My mother had made it very clear that morning, if you leave this house, do not ask us for a dime. I accepted her terms. I embraced the zero balance. A zero balance is terrifying to most people, but to an accountant, it represents a clean start. It means there are no outstanding liabilities, no debts owed to toxic investors. I was entirely my own enterprise now. My dorm room was small, the walls cinder block, painted a sterile institutional white. I unpacked my garbage bags, organized my desk, and sat down with the course catalog. I selected forensic accounting as my major. I wanted to understand how people hid the truth. I wanted to learn the mechanics of deception, how money moves through shell companies, how fraudsters cover their tracks with fake invoices and redacted documents. I realized quickly that the skills required to track cartel money laundering were the exact same skills required to survive Isabella Rodriguez. You have to ignore the narrative and follow the math. You have to look for the missing entries, the things that are not said, the photographs that are deliberately cropped. My first semester, I worked 3 jobs. I operated the front desk at a budget hotel off Interstate 10 from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. I slept for 3 hours, attended my accounting lectures, and then wiped down tables at the campus dining hall. My hands constantly smelled of industrial bleach and stale coffee. I ate ramen noodles and day-old bread the bakery gave away at closing time. I was exhausted down to my marrow, but I was free. I was building equity in myself. Thanksgiving came and went. The campus emptied out. I stayed in Tallahassee picking up extra shifts at the hotel because holiday pay meant I could afford next semester access codes. I did not receive a phone call. In late January, it was my father's birthday. I bought a cheap card from the pharmacy. I did not write a long, emotional message. I just wrote, "Happy birthday, Dad. Love, Evelyn." I addressed the envelope, placed a stamp on the corner, and dropped it in the campus mailbox. It was a test. A small audit to check the status of the account. 14 days later, I opened my tiny metal mailbox in the student union. Inside was my white envelope. Across the front, stamped in heavy red ink, were the words, "Return to sender." Isabella handwriting was visible underneath the stamp. She had taken a thick black marker and aggressively crossed out my name and return address, the ink bleeding through the paper. She had intercepted the mail and sent it back without letting my father see it. I stood in the student union holding the rejected card. The noise of 100 college students walking to class faded into a low hum. I did not feel the sting of rejection. I felt the cold clarity of a verified transaction. I walked back to my dorm room, opened the bottom drawer of my desk, and took out the red ledger. I turned to page 2. I took my glue stick and secured the returned envelope to the page. I picked up my black pen and noted the date, the time, and the action. My mother had officially closed the account. But what she did not realize as she sat in her Miami country club bragging about her perfect family was that I had just begun my audit, and I was going to track every single deficit until the day it came due. The isolation of those college years became my greatest asset. While my classmates rushed sororities and spent their weekends at football tailgates, I learned the architecture of fraud. I sat in the back row of amphitheater lecture halls, my uniform shirt from the dining hall tucked into my backpack, taking meticulous notes on asset concealment. Professor Vance, a man who had spent 20 years at the FBI before moving to academia, paced the front of the room. He drilled into us that fraud always leaves a paper trail. People think they are clever when they cook the books, he said, tapping the whiteboard, but the math never lies. If money goes missing, there is a hole. Your job is to find the hole and measure its depth. I applied his lessons directly to my bloodline. A toxic family operates exactly like a corrupt corporation. They falsify their public filings to attract investors while hiding their massive liabilities off the balance sheet. My mother was the CEO running a masterclass in public relations. I created a fake Facebook account, a burner profile with no friends, and a stock photo of a beach. I used it to monitor the corporate communications of Isabella Rodriguez. Every Sunday, she posted an update. Sophia at a brunch holding a mimosa. My father Hector standing awkwardly next to a new barbecue grill. Isabella wearing a silk sundress, the caption reading, "My beautiful, perfect family, so blessed." I was not in a single frame. I had been systematically erased from the company history. When the holidays arrived, the erasure became more aggressive. The annual Christmas card photo was posted online. They wore matching ivory sweaters standing on the beach at sunset. 3 people smiling into the camera. Isabella had cropped the frame so tight there was not even an empty space where I should have been. To the casual observer, the country club wives and the neighbors, they looked flawless. But with my forensic training, I saw the manipulation. I saw the debt they were accumulating. I did not cry when I saw those photos. I printed them. I went to the campus library, paid 10 cents a page for color copies, and walked them back to my dorm. I opened the red ledger. I glued the Christmas card photo to page 5. I noted the date, the time, and the number of likes Isabella had received. I was documenting the fraud. I was building the case file, measuring the depth of the hole they were digging. By my junior year, I was operating on a razor-thin margin. I slept an average of 4 hours a night. The skin under my eyes bruised purple from the hotel night shifts. I had secured a highly competitive, unpaid internship with a downtown Tallahassee accounting firm reviewing municipal tax records. It was grueling, tedious work, staring at spreadsheets until the numbers blurred, but it was real experience. When the dean list was published, my name was at the top, a perfect 4.0 GPA. I felt a brief, dangerous surge of pride. I took a screenshot of the university website highlighting my name and saved it to my desktop. For 3 days, I debated sending it to my father. Just a quick email. A proof of life. I did not send it. The returned birthday card in my ledger was a clear warning against bad investments. I let the silence hold. The silence, however, was shattered on a Tuesday afternoon in October. I was sitting in the campus library running a complex statistical analysis for my internship. My phone buzzed on the table. A text message from a number I had not seen in 3 years. "Hey, Evie, my Netflix logged me out. Can you send the password again? Want to finish this show before my nail appointment?" It was Sophia. 3 years, 36 months of zero contact. No text on my birthday. No call when a hurricane battered the Florida Panhandle. No inquiry about how I was surviving or eating or paying rent. And now a casual demand for a streaming password, as if I had just stepped into the other room to grab a glass of water. She felt entitled to the resources I paid for with my bleach-stained hands. She expected the service to continue uninterrupted while ignoring the provider. I stared at the screen. The audacity was not surprising, but the timing was interesting. It was an unauthorized withdrawal attempt. I opened my laptop, navigated to the streaming service settings, and hit the button that read, "Sign out of all devices." Then I changed the password. I generated a random string of 16 characters, a mix of symbols, numbers, and uppercase letters. I locked the vault. I did not reply to her text. I went back to my statistical analysis. The retaliation took less than 4 hours. I was walking to my night shift at the hotel when my phone rang. The caller ID flashed, "Isabella Sell." The CEO was calling down to the mailroom. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. I walked through the sliding glass doors of the hotel, clocked in at the front desk, and pulled my phone from my pocket. I stood in the quiet lobby, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, and pressed play on the voicemail. Isabella's voice burst through the tiny speaker, sharp and ragged with fury. "You selfish little psychopath." The audio clipped as she yelled into the receiver. "Sophia is sitting here in tears because you locked her out of an account. A $5 account, Evelyn. Is this how you punish your own blood? You are sick. You have always been sick. This is exactly why we had to protect ourselves from you. Do not think you can play these power games with me. You are nothing without this family. You are alone because you choose to be cruel." The message lasted 3 minutes and 12 seconds. She spiraled through accusations, gaslighting, and threats. She accused me of trying to ruin Sophia Day out of sheer jealousy. She never once mentioned the 3 years of silence. She focused entirely on the denied asset. I listened to the entire recording twice. My hands did not shake. My heart rate remained steady. The training was working. I logged into my secure cloud drive. I uploaded the audio file, naming it Exhibit A, Voicemail, October 12th. Then I opened a blank Word document. I put on my headphones and transcribed the voicemail word for word. I typed out every insult, every unhinged accusation, every narcissistic leap of logic. I printed the transcription. I pulled the red ledger from my backpack. I glued the text to page 9 right next to the printed Facebook photos. I looked at the ledger spread open on the hotel desk. The narrative was becoming undeniable. They were not a family, they were a parasite. They demanded a continuous flow of resources, gratitude, labor, passwords, while offering absolutely nothing in return. When the resources stopped, the parasite attacked. Changing a password was a minor boundary, a tiny speed bump in their highway of entitlement. If this was the reaction to losing access to a television show, the eventual reckoning over real assets would be catastrophic. I closed the ledger. I spent the rest of the night shift studying federal tax code, learning how the IRS audits high net worth individuals who attempt to hide their dirty money. The irony was perfect. I was preparing to dismantle financial criminals while my mother was leaving voicemails providing the exact psychological blueprint of how fraudsters operate. The hotel lobby was empty. I watched the sun come up over the highway, casting long shadows across the asphalt. I had survived another year. I was closer to my degree, closer to my CPA license, closer to the power that comes from undeniable financial independence. I did not know it then, but the ledger was about to face its first major stress test. Sophia was getting engaged, and the parasite was preparing to demand a massive capital injection. 4 years of absolute silence is a highly instructive period of time. It teaches you how to function without a safety net. I graduated from the university at the top of my class, traded my cinder block dorm room for a leased apartment in downtown Miami, and secured a position as a junior forensic accountant at a prestigious corporate firm. My daily routine involved tracking embezzled funds, identifying offshore shell companies, and dismantling the lies of corrupt executives. I sat behind a sleek glass desk wearing tailored suits, analyzing bank records for irregularities. My red ledger sat locked inside my bottom drawer. The balance remained at 0. Then Sophia got engaged. I did not find out through a phone call. Fraudsters prefer to communicate in ways that allow them to control the narrative. I found out through an email that bypassed my spam filter on a Tuesday morning. The sender was Isabella. The subject line read, Sophia Celebration. I opened the message. There were no pleasantries, no inquiries about my new career, my health, or my life in Miami. It was a direct invoice masked as a family obligation. Isabella detailed an upcoming bachelorette party for my sister. They were chartering a 70-foot luxury yacht to the Bahamas for a weekend of catered meals and imported champagne. The total cost was exorbitant. The second paragraph contained the demand. As her sister, it is your duty to contribute to this milestone, Isabella wrote. I am putting you down for $5,000. Consider this your opportunity to step up, act like an adult, and make amends for your past disrespect. Wire the funds by Friday. I read the email 3 times. The sheer audacity of the request was breathtaking. They had provided 0 financial support for my tuition, my textbooks, my rent, or my survival. They had locked me out of my own high school graduation. They had erased my existence from their public facade. Now facing a luxury expense they could not afford, they sought to extract capital from the very daughter they had discarded. They looked at my new corporate job and saw a funding source. I leaned back in my ergonomic desk chair and placed my hands on the cool glass surface. Anger is a useless emotion in an audit. Anger clouds judgment. Data, on the other hand, is pure. I clicked reply. I did not type out a furious paragraph detailing my trauma. I drafted a response formatted exactly like a corporate financial rejection. To Isabella Rodriguez, regarding your request for a $5,000 capital injection for Sophia Yacht Charter, please review the following itemized ledger. Total university tuition paid by parents, $0. Total housing assistance provided, $0. Total living expenses contributed, $0. Current outstanding debt owed to the Rodriguez family, $0. Your request for luxury funding is denied. Do not contact me for financial favors again. I spell-checked the message, hit send, and went back to analyzing a corporate tax return. The retaliation arrived by standard mail 6 days later. I opened my apartment mailbox and found a thick, heavy envelope made of expensive cream parchment. The return address belonged to a luxury wedding planner. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out the invitation. It was an elegant piece of stationery embossed with gold foil, detailing the upcoming nuptials of Sophia and her fiancé. But the beautiful calligraphy had been violently defaced. Isabella had taken a thick, black, permanent marker and aggressively scratched out my printed name. The ink was applied with such force that it tore the top layer of the parchment and bled through to the back. Beneath the crossed-out name, Isabella had written a single sentence in jagged block letters. You are formally uninvited to this family. I held the card to my nose. It smelled of chemical solvent and bitter resentment. It was a physical manifestation of a tantrum. I walked into my home office, opened the safe, pulled out the red binder, and used my glue stick to mount the ruined invitation onto page 14. It was a beautiful piece of evidence. Denying the funding triggered a secondary protocol in their playbook, the smear campaign. Sophia took her grievances to social media. She posted a tearful video on her Instagram account, sitting in the driver's seat of her leased BMW, wearing oversized sunglasses. She dabbed at her dry eyes and delivered a monologue about her toxic, jealous sibling who was deliberately trying to ruin her special season out of pure spite. She claimed I was hoarding my new corporate salary while the family struggled to afford her dream wedding. She did not mention the $5,000 demand. She only marketed the rejection. The video functioned exactly as intended. It activated the extended family. My phone began to vibrate incessantly. Incoming text messages flooded my screen from aunts, uncles, and cousins I had not spoken to in years. The messages were dripping with vitriol. How can you be so selfish after everything your mother did for you? You have money now. You should be helping your sister. You are a disgrace to this bloodline. A normal person might have felt the urge to defend themselves. They might have sent screenshots of Isabella's extortion email to prove their innocence. But I knew that defending yourself to a hostile board of directors is a waste of breath. The extended family did not want the truth. They wanted a villain so they would not have to open their own wallets to fund the yacht. I muted my phone notifications. I opened a blank spreadsheet on my personal laptop. I created 4 columns: sender name, date received, message content, and threat level. For the next 2 hours, I methodically transcribed every hateful text message into the spreadsheet. I categorized the verbal abuse, indexing the flying monkeys who did Isabella dirty work. I was not internalizing their hatred. I was archiving it. When I finished, I saved the document, backed it up to a secure cloud server, and deleted the message threads from my phone. My inbox was clean again. Sophia scheduled her wedding for the 3rd Saturday in June. It was meant to be the social event of their year, a massive catered affair designed to project immense wealth and status to their country club peers. I scheduled my uniform-certified public accountant examination for that exact same date. The contrast between the 2 events was absolute. While Sophia walked down an aisle wearing a designer gown funded by debt to marry a man she treated like an accessory, I walked into a sterile testing center. The room was aggressively air-conditioned. The walls were bare. The only sound was the clicking of keyboards and the low hum of the ventilation system. The CPA exam is notoriously brutal, consisting of 4 grueling sections spanning 16 hours total. It requires an encyclopedic knowledge of auditing, financial, accounting regulation, and business concepts. I sat at a cubicle staring at a computer monitor, answering complex regulatory questions, while my mother posed for photographs holding a glass of expensive champagne, playing the role of the triumphant matriarch. I did not think about the wedding. I did not wonder what they were serving for dinner or who caught the bouquet. My focus was entirely on the screen in front of me. Every correct answer was a brick in the fortress I was building around my life. Every solved equation was a padlock on the door they could never again breach. When the testing clock expired, I stood up, stretched my shoulders, and walked out into the blinding Florida afternoon. I breathed in the humid air, feeling lighter than I had in years. Weeks later, the results arrived. I passed all 4 sections on the first attempt, scoring in the top percentile nationwide. Sophia gained a husband, a massive catering bill, and a hollow social media gallery. I gained a license that granted me access to the highest levels of corporate financial investigation. My career trajectory shifted immediately. I was promoted off the junior desk and handed complex, high-stakes portfolios. My salary doubled. I began building legitimate, quiet wealth while my family continued to construct their lives on a foundation of sand and unpaid invoices. I assumed the ledger was closed permanently. I assumed I would never have to audit the Rodriguez family again. But I had underestimated the reckless financial habits of a golden child. 6 years later, the bill for all that fake luxury was going to come due, and I was the one holding the pen. 6 years is enough time to build a fortress, if you lay the bricks correctly. I'm 34 years old now. My name sits in brushed steel lettering on the glass door of a corner office overlooking Biscayne Bay. I made partner at a boutique forensic accounting firm before my 33rd birthday. My wealth is quiet and methodical. It lives in diversified index funds, a paid-off mortgage on a modern townhouse, and a flawless credit score. I do not drive flashy cars or wear logos that announce my net worth. I prefer the invisible security of liquidity. Sophia operated on the opposite currency. Her entire existence depended on the perception of affluence. She styled herself as a premier luxury realtor for the Miami elite, broadcasting her daily life to a modest audience of aspirational viewers. Out of professional curiosity or perhaps an ingrained habit of monitoring liabilities, I occasionally viewed her public profile from a secure burner account. On a Tuesday afternoon, I spotted a new upload. Sophia was sitting at an exclusive sidewalk cafe holding a supposedly brand new Hermes Birkin bag. The caption read, "Just back from Paris, treating myself to the ultimate closer gift." I zoomed in on the high-resolution image. My eyes naturally gravitate towards structural discrepancies. The gold hardware on that specific bag featured a clasp design the luxury house had discontinued in late 2018. She had not bought it new in Europe. She had purchased it from a secondary consignment market, or it was a high-tier counterfeit. That leather handbag was a physical manifestation of her entire ethos, a shiny, expensive lie masking a depreciating reality. I closed the browser tab. I had real accounts to audit. My firm had recently landed a highly lucrative contract. A national corporate buyer was looking to acquire a mid-sized luxury real estate brokerage based in South Florida. Before finalizing the acquisition, our team was hired to conduct rigorous mergers and acquisitions due diligence. Our mandate was to tear the target company down to its financial studs, ensure their reported profits were authentic, and verify there were no hidden liabilities waiting to ambush the buyer. I initiated the review on a Wednesday morning. My monitors displayed thousands of lines of raw transactional data. Real estate brokerages are notorious for creative accounting, but this particular firm was unusually reckless. Within 4 hours of running predictive models, I spotted the first glaring anomaly. I found a recurring pattern of irregular commission payouts linked to high-end waterfront properties. The numbers did not align with standard industry splits. I dug deeper, pulling the digital escrow logs and matching them against the registered sales. The discrepancy widened. Funds were being diverted into external consulting LLCs right before closing. I isolated the suspect transactions and ran a pivot table to group them by the listing agent. The system processed the data cross-referencing the hidden LLCs with the employee roster. The query returned a single dominant name tied to 90% of the fraudulent entries: Sofia Rodriguez. I sat perfectly still. The ambient noise of the office faded into a distant murmur. I pulled up the supporting tax documents and bank routing numbers. Sofia was not just exaggerating her success on social media to impress her country club peers. She was actively participating in a sophisticated tax evasion and kickback scheme. She was inflating property valuations, taking undocumented cash kickbacks under the table, and hiding the untaxed income through a web of phantom vendor accounts. The scale of the theft was breathtaking. She had siphoned hundreds of thousands of dollars over a 3-year period. This was not a minor accounting error. It was federal wire fraud. A lesser professional might have used this explosive information for immediate revenge. A petty person might have called their estranged family to gloat or held the evidence over their heads as leverage. But I am a licensed, certified public accountant, bound by the strict ethical codes of my profession. Taking personal revenge would violate the independence rule, destroy my license, and compromise my spotless reputation. I refused to risk my empire for her mistakes. I did not hesitate. I gathered the printed ledgers highlighting the phantom LLCs and the diverted commission streams. I placed the documents into a secure red folder and walked directly down the hall to the office of my senior partner, Marcus. I closed his heavy oak door and placed the folder on his mahogany desk. I explained the situation with clinical detachment. I informed him that I had uncovered systemic fraud during the preliminary due diligence phase. I then disclosed that the primary bad actor orchestrating the embezzlement was my estranged sister. Due to the severe conflict of interest, I am formally and legally recusing myself from this account, effective immediately, I told him. I cannot audit my own bloodline. Marcus reviewed the highlighted documents. He did not ask intrusive questions about my family estrangement. He recognized the severity of the financial crimes staring back at him. Following our strict corporate protocol, our firm immediately halted the due diligence process. We informed the corporate buyer that the target brokerage was structurally compromised by internal theft. We handed the corrupted ledgers over to the buyer legal team. By law, that team was obligated to report the findings to the federal authorities. I walked back to my corner office and sat down at my desk. My hands were clean. My integrity remained bulletproof. By adhering strictly to the ethical boundaries of my license, I had ensured that Sofia's impending destruction would be entirely self-inflicted and legally unstoppable. I did not have to plot her downfall. She had engineered it herself with every fake invoice and stolen commission. The federal gears were now turning. The Securities and Exchange Commission and the Internal Revenue Service do not move quickly, but when they finally arrive, they crush everything in their path. Sofia was walking on a financial landmine, taking selfies and sipping champagne while the detonator ticked down under her designer heels. She had no idea the explosion was imminent. Her entire world was about to collapse, and she was blissfully unaware that her discarded sister had been the one to strike the match. But before the federal agents could secure their warrants and knock on her door, the universe decided to balance another lingering account. The fallout from the real estate fraud was approaching rapidly, but it was about to collide head-on with a different kind of public reckoning. While Sophia was secretly hurtling toward a federal indictment, my past was preparing to crash into my present. 16 years after being locked in a bedroom, a highly public honor was about to expose every lie Isabella had ever told. The gears of federal justice grind slow, but they never reverse. While Sophia lived her fabricated life under the shadow of an incoming indictment, a different kind of reckoning arrived on my desk. It came not from a government agency, but via a heavy cream envelope bearing the crest of my former high school. The same institution that had hosted a graduation ceremony with one empty chair 16 years prior. I sliced the envelope open with a silver letter opener. The headmaster had written a sprawling, formal letter. The alumni board had unanimously selected me as their alumna of the decade. They cited my rapid ascension to partner at a top-tier forensic accounting firm. They also highlighted my philanthropic foundation, a program I funded to teach financial literacy and asset protection to at-risk teenage girls in Miami. They were hosting a prestigious gala at a luxury beachfront hotel to present the award, and they requested my presence as the guest of honor. I sat in my office, staring at the embossed crest. The irony was rich enough to audit. 16 years ago, the administration bought Isabella tragic fiction. They believed a grieving mother who claimed her daughter was too unstable to walk across a stage. Now that same administration was printing my name in gold foil, desperate to associate their brand with my corporate success. I accepted the invitation. I did not accept it for vanity. I accepted it to balance the ledger. I intended to walk across the stage they had denied me. 3 days after my formal acceptance, the school launched their marketing campaign. They issued a glowing press release to local Miami business journals. They flooded their social media channels with my corporate headshot, detailing my financial achievements and charitable contributions. The digital footprint expanded rapidly, crossing boundaries and algorithms until it landed directly in the curated feeds of the South Florida high society. This was the exact demographic my mother spent her entire life trying to impress. For over a decade and a half, Isabella had maintained a very specific narrative to explain my absence. Whenever a country club acquaintance asked about her oldest daughter, she would adopt a mournful expression. She would lower her voice and whisper about my supposed failures, my selfish nature, and my tragic estrangement. She painted herself as the wounded matriarch who had tried everything to save a lost child. It garnered her endless sympathy over expensive lunches and charity tennis tournaments. The school press release acted like a sledgehammer to her fragile glass house. I watched the fallout unfold in real time through the analytics on my professional networking profile. Within 48 hours of the announcement, my page views spiked. The names appearing on my dashboard were a roster of Isabella's closest friends. Wealthy wives, real estate developers, and local socialites were suddenly scrutinizing my resume. They were reading about my CPA license, my partnership status, and my board memberships. They were looking at a woman who was demonstrably brilliant, stable, and highly successful. The math no longer added up for Isabella's social circle. The wealthy elite tolerate many things, but they despise being lied to by someone climbing their social ladder. The whispers would have started immediately. If Evelyn is a philanthropic millionaire, why did Isabella say she was a runaway disaster? What kind of mother hides a daughter like that? My mother possessed a predator instinct for social danger. She would have felt the shift in the country club atmosphere, the sudden coldness from women who previously offered her sympathy. Her 16-year lie had imploded. Her currency was crashing. To survive the social fallout, she had to pivot immediately. She could no longer pretend I was a failure, so she had to claim credit for my triumph. I anticipated her panic, but I focused on the logistics of the upcoming event. A courier delivered a sleek black box to my office lobby. Inside rested the gala VIP package. The contents included a timeline of the evening media protocols and 6 platinum embossed tickets. one for the honoree, and 5 front row seats designated specifically for family and distinguished guests. I laid the 5 blank tickets out on my glass desk. They represented the exact number of seats my family would have occupied at my high school graduation, if they had possessed a shred of decency. I picked up a pen. I did not write Sophia name. I did not write Hector name. I certainly did not write Isabella name. I left the designated lines pristine and empty. I instructed my assistant to file the tickets in the shredder. I planned to sit at that front table alone. My success was a solo enterprise, and the seating arrangement would reflect that reality. I went back to reviewing case files, assuming the boundaries were secure. I operated under the logical premise that people who despise you will avoid a room where you hold all the power. I forgot that narcissism overrides logic when public image is at stake. Late Friday afternoon, my inbox chimed. It was an urgent message from the primary gala organizer, a woman named Patricia, who handled high-profile donors for the school. The subject line read, "Urgent, VIP table confirmation." I opened the message. The text was overly polite, but laced with underlying confusion. Patricia wrote to inform me that my mother, Isabella Rodriguez, had just contacted the event planning committee. Isabella had boldly bypassed my office and called the school directly. According to the email, my mother expressed her sheer delight over the award. She then formally submitted an RSVP for the entire family, claiming she was taking charge of the VIP table arrangements to relieve me of the stress. Isabella was attempting a hostile takeover of my event. She planned to walk into that beachfront ballroom, wear a designer gown, and pose for the society photographers as the proud architect of my success. She intended to hijack the microphone's smile for the cameras and force a public reconciliation to salvage her dying reputation among her peers. I stared at the glowing screen. The audacity was a masterclass in psychological warfare. She believed that social pressure would trap me. She calculated that I would never cause a scene at a prestigious charity gala, preferring to quietly endure her presence rather than risk public embarrassment. She thought she was playing chess against an 18-year-old girl locked in a bedroom. She did not realize she was attempting to defraud a seasoned auditor who had already cataloged every crime she ever committed. My phone vibrated on the desk. A text message appeared on the locked screen. It was an unrecognized number, but I knew the source. The invasion had officially begun. I picked up the device and prepared to analyze the next phase of her desperate pivot. The text message glowing on my screen read exactly how a desperate person attempts to sound casual. "So incredibly proud of you, Evie. We need to celebrate this milestone together. Let us put the past behind us and focus on family. Mom." 16 years of venomous silence, followed by a text message utilizing a childhood nickname I despised. The pivot was so aggressive it practically left tire marks on the digital asphalt. I did not reply. A sudden shift in behavior is the primary indicator of concealed liability. When an adversarial entity suddenly offers a truce without a corresponding change in their circumstances, you do not accept the olive branch. You audit their accounts to find out what they are hiding. My mother was terrified of losing her social standing at the country club, but her sheer desperation to hijack the gala felt disproportionate. Narcissists will lie to protect their image, but attempting a hostile takeover of an event hosted by a major Miami institution required a level of reckless panic that mere embarrassment could not explain. There was a missing variable in her equation. I opened a secure, encrypted terminal on my desktop. I possess legal access to extensive public records databases, property registries, and municipal lien filings. These tools are standard issue for my profession, utilized daily to track the hidden assets of corporate embezzlers. I rarely turned these powerful search engines toward my own bloodline. The boundary had always been strict. Today, I dismantled the boundary. I entered Isabella's legal name into the search parameters. I added Hector as a secondary subject. The system began scraping county clerk records, deed transfers, and registered debt instruments across the state of Florida. The progress bar crawled across the screen. I drank my black coffee, waiting for the data to compile. I expected to find normal, upper-middle-class financial behavior, perhaps a high balance on a premium credit card or a standard primary mortgage on their suburban Miami home. The database finalized the report. A PDF document containing 60 pages of financial history materialized on my monitor. I scrolled past the initial demographics and focused on the real property section. The family home, the 4-bedroom house where I grew up, the house with a lock still sat on my old bedroom door, was listed. The primary mortgage Hector had signed 30 years ago was nearly paid off. That aligned with his steady salary as an architect. But below that entry, a newer financial instrument appeared, a secondary lien. I leaned forward, the blue light of the monitor reflecting in my glasses. 4 years ago, right around the time Sophia demanded $5,000 for her luxury yacht bachelorette party, a massive home equity line of credit had been recorded against the property. The principal amount borrowed was staggering. It exceeded the remaining equity in the house. I tracked a disbursement of the borrowed funds through the public registry. The money had not been used for home improvements or medical emergencies. It had been systematically drained to maintain a facade. The math crystallized with devastating clarity. Isabella had secretly leveraged the only real asset her husband owned to fund her golden child. The leased BMWs, the lavish wedding, the designer wardrobes, the country club membership fees. They were all financed by crippling debt. The Rodriguez family was not wealthy. They were highly leveraged actors performing in a play they could no longer afford to produce. Isabella was secretly bankrupt. She was treading water in an ocean of high-interest debt, keeping her head above the surface purely through the illusion of Sophia's success as a luxury realtor. If Sophia continued to bring in inflated commissions, they could barely manage the minimum monthly payments. But I knew something my mother did not. I knew Sophia was currently the target of a federal investigation. I knew the fraudulent commissions were about to vanish. When the federal agents froze Sophia bank accounts and indicted her for wire fraud, the house of cards would instantly collapse. Without that illegal income stream, Isabella would default on the massive secondary mortgage. The bank would foreclose on the family home. The country club would revoke her membership due to unpaid dues. The total financial ruin of Isabella Rodriguez was imminent and inescapable. The plot twist fundamentally altered the battleground. Isabella was not merely trying to salvage her social reputation by crashing my gala. She was fighting for her literal survival. She viewed my newfound public success not as a point of pride, but as a potential bailout. She saw a wealthy, estranged daughter who could be manipulated, bullied, or guilted into paying off a 6-figure debt. She was attempting to hijack the VIP table to project an image of familial unity, making it impossible for me to refuse her eventual demands for capital. I sat back in my chair. The power dynamic had flipped entirely. For 16 years, I believed my mother held the ultimate authority because she dictated the terms of my exclusion. I thought her cruelty was a symptom of her strength. The data proved her cruelty was a symptom of her profound weakness. She was a desperate debtor, preparing to negotiate with the very auditor she had previously banished. I did not feel triumphant. I felt the cold precision of a verified ledger. I knew exactly how much she owed and exactly how little she possessed. I closed the public records database. I did not print the documents. I did not need physical copies of her bankruptcy. The numbers were permanently burned into my memory. I possessed the ultimate leverage, but I chose to keep the information entirely to myself. Confronting her with the debt now would only trigger a premature explosion. A skilled investigator allows the suspect to continue talking, letting them build their own trap with their lies. I picked up my phone and drafted a brief professional email to Patricia, the gala organizer. To the event committee. Regarding the recent unauthorized contact from Isabella Rodriguez, please be advised that this individual has no authority to manage my guest list or RSVP on my behalf. My original instructions stand. The 5 family tickets remain void. Ensure building security is provided with a strict non-admittance list. I will handle any further family communications privately. I sent the message, locking the perimeter of the beachfront hotel. Isabella's text message remained unanswered on my screen. I let it sit there, a digital monument to her desperation. She would interpret my silence not as a boundary, but as an invitation to escalate. Fraudsters who are drowning do not stop when ignored. They increase the pressure. They abandon subtle manipulation and move directly to aggressive confrontation. They show up uninvited, believing their physical presence will force compliance. I placed my phone face down on the desk. The board was set. The liabilities were calculated. I simply had to wait for the debtor to walk into my office and present her demands. The single text message I left unanswered on my desk multiplied overnight. Isabella did not wait for a response. Desperate individuals despise a vacuum. When their initial probe meets silence, they fill the void with noise, hoping to confuse their target and force a reaction. My phone illuminated at 7 in the morning. "Good morning, Evie. I was thinking about your favorite blueberry muffins from that bakery you used to love. We should get brunch this weekend to catch up." An hour later, a second notification arrived. "Sophia is so thrilled for your big night. We are looking at gowns today. She wants to coordinate colors with you." By noon, a third message appeared. "Family is the most important thing in the world. Let us put the past behind us. We need to celebrate your beautiful success together." I read each notification as they populated my screen. For a decade, I had received nothing but hostile silence or direct financial demands. Now, she was deploying affectionate nicknames, baking nostalgia and promises of sisterly bonding. In forensic accounting, we categorize this sudden behavioral shift as a red flag for an impending extraction. Confidence artists use the exact same methodology. They manufacture artificial intimacy to bypass your risk assessment protocols. When a fraudster suddenly offers you a gift, you must immediately check your wallet. Isabella was not offering love. She was laying the groundwork for a bailout. She needed my resources to save her mortgaged house, and she believed a few text messages about blueberry muffins would erase 16 years of calculated exclusion. I ignored the messages. Replying even to decline her invitations would signal that her tactics were generating friction. I preferred to remain a blank wall. However, her digital invasion was not limited to my personal phone. Shortly after lunch, my professional inbox chimed. Patricia, the lead event planner for the Alumni Gala, had forwarded me an email string. Her attached note read, "Please advise on how to proceed. This is highly irregular." I opened the thread. Isabella had bypassed me entirely and contacted the event planning committee again. This time, she did not merely attempt to RSVP for the blank tickets, she escalated her fiction. My mother had drafted a formal email to Patricia, claiming to be my personal manager and family representative. She wrote that due to my demanding corporate schedule, she was handling all my public relations for the award ceremony. She then requested an immediate upgrade to the VIP table seating. She demanded that Sophia and Sophia's husband be added to the front row roster alongside her and my father. She even requested specific dietary accommodations for them and asked for a copy of the run of show so she could approve the media photography schedule. The sheer delusion required to type that email was breathtaking. She was attempting to install herself as the director of my achievement. She wanted to position Sophia, the sister who had publicly mocked me, as the supportive co-star. I picked up my office phone and dialed Patricia direct extension. She answered on the second ring, sounding strained. "I want to apologize for the confusion," I told her, keeping my tone calm and authoritative. The individual who sent that email has no legal or professional affiliation with me or my firm. She is not my manager." Patricia exhaled a breath of relief. "I suspected as much, Evelyn." The tone of her requests felt very out of alignment with how you conduct your business. "How would you like me to handle the seating arrangement?" "You will not respond to her email," I instructed. "You will freeze the guest list exactly as it stands right now. My table will have one chair. Do not issue any additional credentials. Furthermore, I need you to contact the hotel head of security. I believe his name is Davis. Please provide him with photographs of Isabella and Sofia Rodriguez. They are to be placed on a strict do not enter blacklist for the evening. If they arrive at the venue, they are to be turned away at the door." Patricia agreed without hesitation. Event planners for high society galas are well versed in managing wealthy families with toxic internal politics. She assured me the perimeter would be secured and the security team would be briefed. I disconnected the call, feeling a profound sense of tactical advantage. I had locked the doors to the ballroom. But while I was securing the perimeter of my charity event, a much larger and far more dangerous perimeter was closing in on my sister. Down the hall in the executive suite, my senior partner Marcus was holding a closed-door conference with the legal representatives of the corporate buyer. The buyer who had originally hired us to audit Sophia Real Estate Brokerage. While I had ethically recused myself from the account, the firm continued the investigation. The preliminary findings I had uncovered regarding the diverted commissions and the phantom LLCs had triggered mandatory reporting protocols. The buyer attorneys had formally handed the corrupted ledgers over to federal authorities. The Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Internal Revenue Service handle white-collar crime with terrifying precision. They do not send warning letters. They do not call to ask for clarification. They spend weeks silently building an impenetrable wall of evidence. They subpoena bank records, monitor wire transfers, and trace every hidden dollar across state lines. Through the glass walls of my office, I watched the buyer attorneys pack their briefcases and shake hands with Marcus. The expressions on their faces were grim. The due diligence phase was officially terminated. The acquisition was dead. The target brokerage was now considered an active crime scene. Sophia was living on borrowed time. She was likely sitting in a high-end boutique trying on expensive gowns for my gala, entirely unaware that federal agents were currently mapping her financial footprint. The inflated commissions she relied upon to fund her lifestyle were frozen. The phantom consulting companies she used to hide her theft were exposed. The collision course was set, and the vehicles were accelerating. Isabella was drowning under the weight of her secret second mortgage, relying on Sophia's illegal income to keep the family home from foreclosure. Sophia's illegal income was about to be seized by the federal government. Isabella, desperate to find a new source of capital, was aggressively trying to infiltrate my life to secure a financial lifeline before the bank took her country club membership. And all of these volatile elements were hurtling toward a single night. The Alumni of the Decade Award ceremony was only a few days away. Isabella's remote tactics had failed. Her text messages were ignored. Her fabricated email to the event planner had resulted in a security blacklist. Narcissists rely on momentum to overwhelm their targets. When their digital manipulation hits a reinforced firewall, they do not retreat and reflect on their behavior. They escalate to physical proximity. They believe that cornering you in person will strip away your defenses and force you to comply with their narrative. I knew my mother could not tolerate the silence any longer. She needed my compliance to ensure her survival. She needed to look me in the eye and exert the authority she believed she still possessed. I reviewed my afternoon schedule. I had a 2:00 meeting with a junior analyst and a 4:00 conference call. The rest of the day was open. I neatly stacked my files and placed my favorite red pen next to my keyboard. The trap was fully constructed. I merely had to wait for the desperate predators to walk through the front doors of my firm. The intercom on my sleek glass desk chimed at exactly 2:14 in the afternoon. My receptionist, Sarah, spoke through the speaker. Her tone carried a distinct layer of professional confusion. "Evelyn, I have 2 women in the lobby. They claim to be your mother and sister. They told me it was a surprise visit to celebrate your recent award." I paused my typing. The perimeter had been breached. They had bypassed the ignored text messages and the failed event planner emails to launch a direct physical assault on my territory. "Send them back," I told Sarah. My corner office featured floor-to-ceiling glass walls looking out over the open concept bullpen where 40 accountants and analysts worked. I stood up and watched the hallway. Isabella and Sophia strutted through the double doors. They were dressed in high-end resort wear, projecting the exact image of wealthy Miami socialites. Isabella wore a pristine white linen suit. Sophia carried the questionable Hermes handbag I had spotted on her social media feed. They performed for my staff as they walked. Isabella smiled warmly at passing junior associates, commenting on the beautiful office architecture, playing the role of the doting, triumphant matriarch. They reached my door. I opened it and stepped aside. Isabella wrapped her arms around my shoulders, attempting to pull me into an embrace. I kept my arms strictly at my sides, yielding nothing. She patted my cheek loudly, stating how proud she was for the benefit of the analysts sitting at the nearest workstations. "Step inside," I said. They walked into my office. I closed the heavy acoustic glass door. The click of the latch severed the connection to the bullpen. The soundproof engineering of the room meant no one outside could hear a single syllable spoken within. The moment the latch engaged, the performance terminated. Isabella dropped her warm maternal smile. Her facial muscles tightened into a severe, rigid mask. Sophia sank into one of the leather guest chairs, crossing her legs nervously. The confident luxury realtor facade dissolved, revealing a panicked amateur drowning in deep water. "We do not have time for games, Evelyn," my mother said. She bypassed any pleasantries, pacing the length of my Persian rug. "We have a family emergency, and you are going to fix it." I leaned against the edge of my desk, crossing my arms. "Define emergency." Sophia spoke up, her voice trembling slightly. "My brokerage is undergoing an acquisition audit. Your firm is running the due diligence." She swallowed hard, clutching the handle of her fake designer bag. "The buyer sent our managing broker a notice yesterday halting the acquisition. They flagged several of my accounts. They are claiming there are discrepancies in my commission structures and some vendor payouts." "A clerical error," Isabella interjected sharply, "a minor bookkeeping oversight. But the corporate buyers are overreacting. They are threatening to freeze the escrow accounts." I looked at my sister. The sheer delusion required to classify systemic wire fraud as a clerical error was a testament to the alternate reality my mother had constructed for her. They genuinely believed that financial crimes were just rules meant for other people. "You want me to intervene?" I stated, clarifying their objective. "You are a partner at this firm," Isabella said, stopping her pacing to point a manicured finger at my chest. "You have the authority to review those ledgers and adjust the findings. You can sign off on a revised report that clears your sister name. You will tell the corporate buyers that the initial flags were false positives." I processed the demand. My mother was standing in my office instructing a licensed, certified public accountant to falsify an audit report, cover up hundreds of thousands of dollars in stolen funds, and commit federal fraud to protect the golden child. She delivered the instruction with the casual entitlement of a woman asking for a glass of water. And Isabella added, narrowing her eyes, "There is the matter of the alumni gala. I know you instructed the planners to freeze the VIP table. You will call them right now and release those tickets. We are attending that event as a family. We need the local press to see us together. It will project stability and silence any rumors about Sophia Professional's standing." The strategy was clear. Isabella needed my pristine corporate reputation to launder Sophia dirty money. She needed the Miami high society to see us smiling for the cameras at a prestigious charity event, so the country club would not suspect her impending bankruptcy. She was attempting to use my life work as a shield against her own collapse. I did not yell. I did not point out the sheer hypocrisy of demanding a favor after 16 years of calculated cruelty. Showing anger would validate their tactic. It would prove they still possessed the ability to affect my emotional baseline. Instead, I turned around and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. I reached past the pristine corporate files and pulled out the worn red accounting ledger. I placed the binder on the glass surface between us. The heavy cardboard cover echoed in the quiet room. "What is that?" Sophia asked, her eyes darting to the worn edges. "Just a record," I replied, keeping my voice flat. I looked at them, calculating the optimal path forward. I could have thrown them out of the building. I could have informed them that their demands were irrelevant. But a cornered fraudster is unpredictable. If I rejected them outright, they might panic and attempt to destroy the gala in a desperate spectacle. I needed them to leave my office quietly. I needed them to feel secure long enough for the federal trap to snap shut. I deployed a tactical diversion, a red herring designed to feed their arrogance. "Falsifying a finalized report is complicated," I said, choosing my words with deliberate ambiguity. "I cannot simply erase data without reviewing the raw inputs. If you want me to look into this clerical error, I need the unredacted ledgers from your brokerage. Every transaction, every LLC payout, every escrow transfer. Bring the physical files to my receptionist, Sarah, tomorrow morning." Isabella's posture relaxed instantly. Her shoulders dropped. She interpreted my calculated response as total submission. She heard exactly what she wanted to hear. The estranged daughter had folded under the weight of maternal authority. "I knew you would see reason," Isabella said, her voice returning to that sickeningly sweet tone she used in the lobby. "Blood is thicker than any corporate policy, Evie. Families protect each other." Sophia let out a long breath, sinking back into the leather chair. "Thank God. I will have the files boxed up and couriered here by 9 tomorrow. We will expect the VIP tickets to be released by tomorrow afternoon," Isabella added, picking up her designer sunglasses from the credenza. "Do not make me ask twice, Evelyn." They turned and walked toward the door. Isabella opened it, resuming her bright smile the moment she stepped back into the view of my staff. They strutted down the hallway toward the elevators, victorious and unchallenged. They believed they had successfully bullied an auditor into becoming an accomplice. I stood in the silence of my office and watched the elevator doors close behind them. The dramatic irony hung in the air, heavy and sweet. I did not need Sophia unredacted ledgers. I did not plan to adjust a single finding. My firm had already terminated the due diligence contract days ago. The original unedited files containing every single piece of evidence proving her theft were no longer in my possession. The Federal Bureau of Investigation already had them. My mother and sister had just walked out of my firm, believing they had secured a parachute. They did not realize they were in free fall, and the ground was rushing up to meet them. By asking them to deliver the files, I had merely purchased 72 hours of quiet. However, I knew Isabella's psychology too well. The illusion of control is an addictive substance. She would not wait patiently for the gala tickets. As the days ticked closer to the event, her anxiety regarding the country club rumors would spike. She would need immediate verification that her social image was secured. When the digital tickets failed to arrive in her inbox, her arrogance would override her patience. She would attempt to bypass my stalling tactic. She would try to force my hand, utilizing the one tool she always relied upon when she felt ignored. My desk phone sat silently next to the red binder. I knew it was only a matter of time before the red light began to flash, indicating an incoming voicemail. And when she left that message, she would hand me the final, definitive asset I needed to close her account permanently. The false sense of security I provided my mother lasted exactly 48 hours. During that window, the courier from Sophia Brokerage arrived precisely at 9 in the morning, delivering 3 heavy cardboard banker boxes filled with physical ledgers. I instructed my receptionist, Sarah, to place the boxes in a secure storage closet. I did not open them. I did not need to verify data the federal authorities were already utilizing to draft grand jury indictments. I spent the next 2 days finalizing the logistics for the alumni gala. The beachfront hotel confirmed the security perimeter. The local press issued their attendance rosters. The Miami Society pages were buzzing with anticipation. Isabella anxiety, however, was escalating on a parallel timeline. The absence of the VIP tickets in her inbox gnawed at her fragile ego. She was accustomed to immediate compliance. When her demands were not instantly gratified, her panic over losing the country club narrative overpowered her strategic patience. She needed absolute confirmation that I was executing her orders. She needed to feel the leash tighten around my neck. On Thursday afternoon at 3:14, my direct corporate line began to ring. My office extension is not a public number. It is reserved for high-level clients, regulatory agencies, and senior partners. Isabella had clearly bullied the receptionist into transferring the call, bypassing my screening protocols. I sat at my desk, watching the digital display flash her name. I did not pick up the receiver. Engaging in a live conversation allows a manipulator to pivot, change tactics, and deny their intentions later. A voicemail, however, is a fixed asset. It is an unalterable transaction. The phone rang 4 times before the system redirected the call to my digital inbox. My corporate voicemail system operates under strict regulatory compliance. Because our firm routinely handles sensitive financial data, mergers and acquisitions, and internal corporate audits, we are legally required to maintain pristine communication records. When a call rolls to my extension, an automated, unskippable greeting plays before the tone. The computerized voice states clearly, calls to this firm are recorded for quality assurance and regulatory compliance. Please leave your message after the beep. Florida operates under a strict 2-party consent law regarding the recording of private communications. If you secretly record someone without their knowledge, the audio is legally inadmissible, and the act itself constitutes a felony. However, if a caller hears an explicit warning that the line is being monitored and chooses to remain on the line and speak, they have legally provided their consent. The warning acts as a binding contract. I stared at the blinking red light on my console, waiting for the system to process the audio file. A minute later, an email appeared in my inbox containing the attached MP3 recording. I clicked play. Isabella did not begin with a greeting. Her voice was sharp, brittle, and dripping with the toxic entitlement she had cultivated over decades of unchecked behavior. Evelyn, this silent treatment is unacceptable. She snapped the audio perfectly crisp over the digital line. Sophia sent the boxes 2 days ago. I expected those VIP gala tickets in my email yesterday. You are not going to play games with me while your sister career is on the line. You will fix her tax problem. You will make those corporate buyers go away. And you will release those tickets immediately. If you do not comply, I will personally walk into that ballroom tomorrow night, take the microphone, and tell every single person in that room exactly what kind of ungrateful, vindictive daughter you really are. I will ruin you in front of your precious colleagues. Do not test me. The message ended with the sharp click of the receiver slamming down. I sat in my quiet office, the afternoon sun reflecting off the Biscayne Bay outside my window. I played the recording a second time. My mother, arrogant, impatient, and blinded by her own desperation, had just handed me the final, devastating entry for the red ledger. She had ignored the unskippable legal warning. She had spoken directly into a compliant corporate recording system. By leaving that message, she had generated an undeniable, legally obtained audio file of herself attempting to extort a licensed, certified public accountant. She explicitly demanded the falsification of a corporate audit to cover up federal wire fraud, using a high-profile charity event as leverage for her blackmail. She had just manufactured her own destruction. I did not feel a rush of vindictive adrenaline. I felt the profound calm of an auditor finalizing a perfectly balanced spreadsheet. The math was complete. Every liability, every fraudulent claim, every empty threat had been documented, verified, and secured. I opened my secure cloud drive. I downloaded the MP3 file, creating 3 separate encrypted backups. I transferred a copy to a portable flash drive the size of a thumbnail. I placed the drive inside my locked desk drawer, right next to the red binder. The trap was no longer theoretical. It was fully armed and operational. Isabella believed she held the ultimate leverage. She thought the threat of public humiliation at the gala would force me to shield Sophia from the consequences of her theft. She assumed my desire to protect my pristine corporate image would override my boundaries. She relied on the premise that I would rather quietly absorb her abuse than risk a scene in front of the Miami elite. She was applying the psychology of a frightened 18-year-old girl locked in a bedroom to a 34-year-old woman who hunted financial predators for a living. I closed my laptop and packed my briefcase. The workday was over. The preparations were complete. I had ethically removed myself from the federal investigation, ensuring Sophia's fate was entirely in the hands of the government. I had secured the perimeter of my charity event, instructing security to block the hostile actors, and I now possessed the ultimate receipt, the legally binding audio file of Isabella extortion attempt. The alumni gala was scheduled for the following evening. The Miami High Society was preparing their designer gowns and reviewing their seating charts. The local press photographers were charging their camera batteries. The event planners were finalizing the catering menus. And my mother, confident in her blackmail, was preparing to strut down the red carpet and reclaim her position as the triumphant matriarch of the Rodriguez family. She was preparing to walk into a ballroom filled with the exact people she spent her entire life trying to impress. She was preparing to hijack my achievement to mask her secret bankruptcy. I walked out of my office, locking the glass door behind me. I rode the elevator down to the lobby, the hum of the machinery matching the steady rhythm of my pulse. I had survived 16 years of calculated erasure. I had built an empire from a zero balance. I was ready to attend my awards ceremony. And this time, no one was going to take my keys or lock my door. The real question was not whether Isabella would attempt to breach the perimeter. The question was, what would happen when she realized the perimeter was a cage designed specifically for her? The night of the alumni gala arrived wrapped in the heavy, warm air typical of an early Miami evening. The beachfront hotel selected for the event was an architectural masterpiece of glass and white stucco, projecting the exact kind of sterile opulence the local high society craved. I stepped out of my hired car wearing a custom-tailored midnight blue evening gown. My hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon. I wore no prominent jewelry, preferring the stark authority of a clean silhouette. I looked exactly like a woman who managed millions of dollars in corporate assets. I bypassed the chaotic red carpet where minor celebrities and local politicians were posing for the flashbulbs. Patricia, the lead event planner, met me at the private VIP entrance. She looked anxious, her clipboard clutched tightly against her chest. "Everything is ready, Evelyn," she said, guiding me toward the private elevator. "The main ballroom is filling up quickly. The mayor just arrived, and the school board members are taking their seats." "And the perimeter?" I asked, keeping my tone conversational. Patricia nodded sharply. "Security Chief Davis is personally manning the main guest entrance. He has the photographs and the strict denial list." I thanked her and rode the elevator to the second-floor mezzanine. The mezzanine featured an ornate, curved balcony overlooking the grand foyer and the main entrance doors below. I walked to the edge and rested my hands on the marble railing, looking down at the incoming tide of Miami elite. The foyer was a sea of expensive tuxedos and designer silk. Waitstaff carrying silver trays of champagne wove seamlessly through the crowds. The ambient noise was a low, cultured hum of wealthy individuals exchanging strategic pleasantries. This was the exact ecosystem my mother had sacrificed her financial stability to inhabit. Every person in that foyer represented a social currency Isabella desperately needed to maintain her illusion of success. The timeline of the evening caught up to the present moment. The trap was about to spring. Through the massive glass doors of the hotel entrance, I spotted them. Isabella and Sophia strutted into the lobby, projecting total confidence. They were wearing elaborate, heavily beaded gowns that screamed of desperate, newly acquired wealth. I recognized the aesthetic immediately. Those dresses were high-end rentals secured for the evening to project a status they could no longer afford to buy. Isabella was smiling radiantly, waving at a group of country club wives she recognized near the coat check. Sophia trailed slightly behind her, clutching her counterfeit handbag, looking nervous but bolstered by her mother's arrogance. They believed they had won. They assumed my silence over the past 24 hours was proof of my submission. They were convinced that the extortion voicemail had terrified me into compliance, ensuring their names would be magically restored to the VIP roster. They were walking into the venue prepared to hijack the narrative and pose as the proud architects of my achievements. They approached the velvet ropes cordoning off the main ballroom entrance. Security Chief Davis, a broad-shouldered man with the rigid posture of a former law enforcement officer, stood squarely in the center of the walkway. He wore a tailored black suit with a discreet earpiece curled around his jaw. He held a clipboard containing the laminated master guest list. Isabella did not slow her pace. She expected the ropes to part for her automatically. She flashed her brilliant manufactured smile at Davis, extending her hand as if she owned the building. "Good evening," she chimed, her voice loud enough to carry to the nearby groups of socialites. "Isabella Rodriguez and my daughter, Sophia. We are the VIP family of the honoree." Davis did not return the smile. He did not unclip the velvet rope. He looked down at his clipboard, his expression completely devoid of customer service warmth. He ran his finger down the laminated page. "I am sorry, ma'am," he said, his voice projecting a firm professional baseline. "I do not have a Rodriguez listed for the VIP tables or for general admission." The immediate vicinity grew slightly quieter. A few of the country club wives Isabella had waved to earlier paused their conversations, turning their heads to watch the interaction. Public rejection at a high society checkpoint is a spectator sport for the wealthy. Isabella's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before snapping back into place. She let out a short, condescending laugh intended to dismiss the error. "There must be a mistake on your little clipboard," she said, her tone sharpening. "I am Evelyn, Mother, the alumna of the decade. We are supposed to be seated at the front table. Just let us through and I will have the event planner sort out your paperwork later." She stepped forward, attempting to physically push past the velvet rope. Davis shifted his weight, smoothly blocking her path with his massive frame. He did not raise his voice, but the sheer density of his presence halted her momentum entirely. "There is no mistake, ma'am," he stated loud enough for the surrounding socialites to hear clearly. "You are on the explicit do not admit list provided directly by the honoree. You are not permitted inside the venue. I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the entrance." The color drained from Isabella's face. The public humiliation was instantaneous and absolute. She was standing in the center of the grand foyer, surrounded by the exact peers she spent her life trying to impress, and a security guard was loudly identifying her as an unwanted exile. From my vantage point on the balcony, I watched the psychological collapse happen in real time. The illusion of control she had clung to since she locked my bedroom door 16 years ago shattered against the unyielding reality of the velvet rope. The extortion voicemail had not secured her a parachute. It had finalized her eviction. A local society photographer, sensing the sudden tension in the room, rotated his heavy camera lens toward the altercation. The flashbulb fired, illuminating Isabella's shocked red face. The camera flash triggered her panic. The realization that her public exclusion was being documented overrode her carefully cultivated country club manners. She abandoned the poised matriarch routine and reverted to the aggressive hostility she usually reserved for the privacy of our suburban home. "This is ridiculous," she shrieked, her voice echoing sharply against the marble walls. "Do you know who I am? I am the reason she is receiving this award. You get Evelyn out here right now. She is expecting us." Sophia, recognizing the catastrophic social damage unfolding, grabbed her mother's arm, attempting to pull her back toward the exit. "Mom, stop. People are staring. Let us just go." Isabella yanked her arm free, her eyes wide and manic. "I am not leaving. I am her mother. She owes me this." Davis crossed his arms over his chest. His patience had evaporated. "Ma'am, if you do not lower your voice and exit the premises immediately, I will have you physically removed for trespassing." Isabella looked wildly around the foyer. She saw the judgmental stares of her peers. She saw the photographer reviewing the digital image on his camera screen. She looked up, scanning the architecture of the hotel, searching for a way to bypass the humiliation. Her eyes caught the movement on the second-floor mezzanine. She looked up and saw me standing at the marble railing. I was looking directly down at her. I did not look angry. I did not look frightened. I looked exactly like an auditor watching a bankrupt account finally hit zero. I held her gaze for 3 full seconds, ensuring she understood that the perimeter was not a clerical error. It was a deliberate, calculated execution of her social standing. I gave Davis a subtle, barely perceptible nod, confirming his instructions. Isabella mouth opened, but no sound came out. The sheer velocity of her defeat paralyzed her. But a cornered narcissist, facing total financial and social ruin, does not simply walk away quietly into the night. When the front door is barricaded, their desperation forces them to seek an alternative route. They will risk absolute destruction for one final chance to reclaim control of the narrative. I turned away from the balcony and walked toward the private elevator leading to the backstage area. The opening skirmish was concluded, but the primary assault was yet to come. I rode the private elevator down to the backstage holding area. The muffled sound of applause bled through the heavy velvet curtains separating me from the main ballroom. The event was proceeding exactly on schedule. The headmaster of the school was at the podium delivering the introductory remarks detailing the history of the Alumni of the Decade Award. Patricia, the event planner, handed me a sleek wireless microphone. "You are on in 3 minutes, Evelyn." She adjusted her headset, listening to the chatter from the security team. "Davis confirmed your mother has left the front lobby. He said she caused quite a scene before pulling her daughter out the main doors." I took the microphone, testing its weight in my hand. "Thank you, Patricia. But please advise Davis to monitor the secondary access points. She has not left the property." Patricia frowned, tapping her earpiece. You'd think she would try to sneak back in after a public rejection like that. I looked at the heavy velvet curtains. She is operating under the threat of foreclosure and public disgrace, Patricia. Rational behavior left the equation days ago. I stepped into the wings, waiting for my cue. The grand ballroom was a spectacular display of organized wealth. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceilings, casting a warm golden light over 70 tables covered in crisp white linen. 500 of Miami's most influential citizens sat eating catered filet mignon, waiting to hear my acceptance speech. The local news affiliates had set up their cameras near the soundboard, capturing the prestige of the evening. The headmaster concluded his remarks. It is my profound honor to present the Alumna of the Decade Award to a woman whose integrity and professional excellence exemplify the highest standards of this institution. Please welcome Evelyn Rodriguez. The applause rolled through the ballroom like thunder. I stepped out from behind the curtain and walked toward the center stage podium. I did not rush. I took my time commanding the physical space, acknowledging the standing ovation from the VIP tables. I reached the microphone and looked out across the sea of faces. At that exact moment, the heavy double doors at the far rear of the ballroom burst open. The sound of the heavy wood slamming against the brass doorstops cut through the fading applause. Hundreds of heads turned toward the back of the room. Isabella stood framed in the doorway, dragging a thoroughly panicked Sophia by the wrist. She had bypassed the secured front entrance, navigating the labyrinthine service hallways of the hotel, until she found an unguarded catering access point. She had breached the perimeter. She stood at the rear of the ballroom, her rented designer gown slightly rumpled from her frantic navigation through the service corridors. She was breathing heavily, but her face was twisted into a triumphant sneer. She believed she had outsmarted the system. She believed she had successfully ambushed me on the largest stage of my career. She locked eyes with me across the expanse of the ballroom. She began marching down the center aisle, pushing past a waiter carrying a tray of champagne glasses. "Evelyn," she projected her voice, carrying the shrill frequency of a woman preparing to detonate a scene. "I am here. Your mother is here. We are not going to be silenced anymore." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. The wealthy donors, the school board members, the local politicians, they all froze, unsure if this was a bizarre planned interruption or a catastrophic security failure. Patricia frantically signaled the AV team from the wings, trying to figure out if she should cut the house audio. Sophia trailed behind her mother, looking frantically at the news cameras recording their intrusion. She recognized the sheer illegality of their current position, but she lacked the backbone to stop the matriarch. Isabella continued her march toward the stage, operating under the delusion that her mere presence would terrify me into submission. She planned to reach the podium, grab the microphone, and perform her ultimate victim narrative. She intended to tell the Miami elite that I was a cruel, ungrateful daughter who abandoned her family after they sacrificed everything for my success. She was gambling her entire social standing on the premise that I would surrender rather than engage in a public screaming match. She expected me to panic. She expected me to shrink back, yielding the authority of the room to her, as I had done when I was 18 years old, locked inside my bedroom. I did not panic. I did not signal security to intervene. I stood perfectly still at the podium, gripping the edges of the sleek acrylic stand. I looked at the woman marching down the aisle, the woman who had secretly mortgaged her home to fund a fraud, the woman who had demanded I commit federal crimes to save her fake empire. I looked at the mother who had thrown my high school graduation speech into the garbage. I smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the precise, calculated expression of an auditor watching a massive liability finally step onto the balance sheet. Isabella had not ruined my night by breaching the perimeter. She had executed my exact tactical design. By forcing her way into the ballroom, she had voluntarily placed herself in the direct center of the trap. She had gathered the exact audience she spent her life trying to impress, and she had directed all their attention toward the stage. She had done the hardest part of the work for me. She reached the edge of the stage, stopping just below the steps leading up to the podium. She placed her hands on her hips, glaring up at me. "Did you really think you could keep us out, Evelyn?" she demanded loudly, ensuring the front row VIPs could hear every word. "Did you think you could celebrate this award without acknowledging the family that built you? We are not leaving until you tell these people the truth." The ballroom was entirely silent. The tension was suffocating. 500 people held their breath, waiting to see how the alumna of the decade would handle the unhinged woman disrupting her ceremony. I leaned forward into the microphone. My voice echoed crisp and perfectly calm across the massive room. "I am so glad you could make it, Isabella." The use of her first name rather than the maternal title sent a visible shockwave through her posture. She blinked, the triumphant sneer faltering for a fraction of a second. She had expected fear. She had expected compliance. She had not prepared for clinical detachment. I looked out at the audience addressing the wealthy donors and the school administration. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the sudden interruption. However, the woman standing before you has requested that I share the truth about the foundation of my success. I believe transparency is the cornerstone of any rigorous audit, and I am happy to oblige her demand." I reached into my small evening clutch resting on the shelf of the podium. I bypassed the sleek digital teleprompter remote. My fingers brushed past my lipstick and found the folded piece of paper I had carried with me for 16 years. I pulled out the crumpled, yellowed, coffee-stained draft of my high school graduation speech. I unfolded the fragile paper, carefully flattening the creases against the acrylic podium. The ink was faded, the watermarks visible under the harsh stage lighting. It was the exact physical asset I had glued to the first page of my red ledger so many years ago. Isabella recognized the document immediately. I watched the blood drain from her face. The triumphant sneer evaporated, replaced by a sudden, dawning horror. She realized too late that she had not ambushed an insecure teenager. She had cornered a forensic accountant who had spent a decade and a half archiving her crimes. 16 years ago, I said my voice, carrying the absolute authority of a verified ledger, I was the valedictorian of this very institution. But I did not walk across the graduation stage. For 16 years, you were told I suffered a breakdown. You were told I was too fragile to attend. I looked directly down at Isabella, her face pale under the chandeliers. That was a fabricated narrative, I stated the words, slicing through the heavy silence of the ballroom. I did not attend graduation because the woman standing right there locked me in my bedroom, confiscated my keys, and threw this exact speech into the garbage. She deemed it insufficiently grateful for her sacrifices. The murmurs began instantly. The high society elite, the women Isabella had played tennis with, the men she had bragged to, they began whispering rapidly among themselves. The meticulously crafted illusion of the tragic, devoted mother shattered into pieces on the ballroom floor. But exposing the lie of my graduation was merely the opening entry in the audit. It established the baseline of her fraud. Now that the audience understood the depth of her deception, I was prepared to execute the final, devastating transaction. I was going to show them exactly what she had demanded I be grateful for. The ballroom remained suspended in a breathless vacuum. 500 influential guests sat immobilized, their expensive catered dinners cooling on porcelain plates. I looked down at the fragile, yellowed paper resting on the acrylic podium. The coffee stains from 16 years ago looked like rust blooms against the faded blue lines. I adjusted the microphone. I did not need to raise my voice. The acoustics of the room were engineered to amplify a whisper. Let me share the exact words my mother decided were too disrespectful to be heard, I said. I looked down at my own teenage handwriting. The script was rounded, eager, and filled with an optimism I had long since audited out of my personality. To the graduating class, I read, my voice steady, projecting the innocence of an 18-year-old girl across the silent room. We did not reach this stage alone. We stand here because of the foundation built by our community. I want to thank Mr. Henderson, who stayed late every Tuesday to ensure I understood advanced calculus. I want to thank the cafeteria staff who always saved me a plate when I was studying in the library during lunch. I want to thank my peers who pushed me to be better. We are a product of the investments made in us by people who asked for nothing in return. I paused, The contrast between the pure, unblemished gratitude of the text and the monstrous punishment it provoked hung over the ballroom. The wealthy donors and country club socialites were intelligent people. They processed the data immediately. They realized that Isabella Rodriguez had not been protecting a fragile daughter. She had brutally punished a teenager for failing to stroke her ego. She had stolen a once-in-a-lifetime milestone simply because she was not listed as the primary beneficiary of the applause. Isabella stood at the base of the stage, her rented gown suddenly looking cheap under the harsh spotlights. The women she played tennis with, the wives of local politicians, the charity board members, they were all staring at her. Their expressions had shifted from confusion to profound disgust. The social currency she had spent decades accumulating was evaporating into thin air. She opened her mouth, attempting to launch a counteroffensive. "Evelyn, you are taking this out of context," she stammered, her voice lacking its usual commanding volume. "I was trying to teach you about family values. You were out of control." Her defense was weak, structurally unsound. It crumbled the moment it left her lips. The audience did not murmur in agreement. They remained entirely silent, refusing to offer her the validation she desperately sought. Sophia, standing a few feet behind her mother, instinctively took a half-step backward, distancing herself from the epicenter of the social blast radius. She looked at the local news cameras tracking their every move. She realized her face was being broadcasted alongside this catastrophic exposure. The luxury realtor brand she had cultivated online was being dragged into a public relations nightmare. I looked back down at the speech. "There is one final paragraph," I said, drawing the attention back to the podium. I read the closing lines. "And finally, I want to thank my parents for giving me the drive to pursue my education and for showing me exactly what it takes to succeed in the real world. I promise to build a life that reflects the true value of the resources given to me." I folded the delicate paper, tracing the sharp crease with my thumb. I placed it back into my clutch, securing the latch. I looked down at the woman who had locked me in a bedroom over those exact words. "I showed you the true value of your investment, Isabella. You gave me nothing, and I built an empire from the zero balance." The sheer factual weight of the statement pinned her to the floor. She could not argue the mathematics of my success. I stood before her as a partner at a top-tier forensic accounting firm, a recognized philanthropist, and the honored guest of a major institution. She stood before me wearing a rented dress, harboring a secret second mortgage, and relying on stolen funds to maintain a facade. But a narcissist cannot process a deficit. When presented with undeniable proof of their bankruptcy, they do not apologize. They double down. They attempt to rewrite the ledger using emotional manipulation. Isabella straightened her spine, gripping the fabric of her skirt. She raised her chin, attempting to project the authority of a wounded martyr. "You owe me," she shouted, her voice cracking as it echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "You stand up there, showing off your money and your fancy title, but you would be nothing without me. I carried you. I fed you. I sacrificed my own happiness so you could have a roof over your head. You owe me everything you have. You are a cold, heartless auditor who cares more about numbers than your own blood." She pointed a trembling finger at me, playing her final card. "You want to talk about gratitude? You should be down on your knees thanking me for raising you." I watched her perform. It was the same script she had utilized my entire life. The expectation that providing basic biological necessities entitled her to a lifetime of unquestioning servitude and unlimited capital extraction. She truly believed that giving birth granted her an unconditional lien against my future earnings. I did not interrupt her outburst. I let her voice fill the massive ballroom. I let the 500 influential guests hear the exact tone she used to extort her children. Every syllable she shouted only further dismantled her reputation. When she finally ran out of breath, her chest heaving, the silence returned. I leaned close to the microphone. The acrylic stand felt cool and solid beneath my palms. "You are correct about one thing," I replied, my tone clinical and detached. "I am an auditor, and my profession has taught me a crucial lesson about human behavior. Fraudsters always demand gratitude for the things they never actually provided. They present you with an invoice for sacrifices they never made, and they expect you to pay the balance without checking the receipts." I looked out at the audience, scanning the faces of the Miami elite. Many of them were nodding slowly, recognizing the toxic dynamic playing out before them. 16 years ago, I continued my voice carrying the steady rhythm of a finalized report. I was a child who did not understand how to protect my assets. I allowed you to dictate my worth. But I have spent the last decade and a half studying the architecture of deception. I have learned how to track hidden liabilities, uncover offshore shell companies, and identify bad actors. I have learned a great deal about debts and gratitude since I was 18 years old. I shifted my gaze back down to Isabella. She was breathing shallowly, her eyes darting nervously toward the sound booth in the back of the room. She sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The confident predator had suddenly realized she was standing on a trap door. "You claim I owe you gratitude," I said, measuring each word with deliberate precision. "You claim I am a cold daughter who refuses to acknowledge your sacrifices. Let us test that hypothesis. Let us examine the most recent transaction in our family ledger." I lifted my hand from the podium and gave a brief, prearranged signal to the audio-visual technicians stationed in the elevated booth at the rear of the ballroom. Isabella frowned, confusion briefly replacing the panic on her face. Sophia let out a small, involuntary gasp, her eyes widening as she recognized the tactical shift. "Let us update the ledger right now," I told my mother, ensuring the microphone caught the exact cadence of my authority. "I want this entire room to hear exactly what you asked me to be grateful for this past Thursday afternoon." The technicians in the booth executed my command. The massive digital projection screens flanking the stage flickered to life. A stark, high-contrast audio waveform appeared on the displays, glowing bright white against a black background. The trapdoor swung open, and gravity took control. The digital waveform pulsed in sharp, jagged peaks across the dual projection screens. The bright white lines hovered against the black background like an electrocardiogram measuring a failing heart. Isabella recognized the visual representation of an audio file. Her survival instincts finally overrode her arrogance. She realized I was not bluffing. The confident matriarch persona shattered entirely, replaced by the frantic energy of a cornered predator. She lunged toward the wooden steps leading up to the stage, her rented, beaded gown catching on the edge of the carpet. "Turn that off," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at the AV booth in the back of the room. She scrambled up the first 2 steps, her heels striking the hollow wood. "You are a liar, Evelyn. You are a monster. I gave you everything. I sacrificed my youth for you. I sacrificed my happiness. You will not stand up there and humiliate me." She reached the top of the stairs, preparing to storm the podium and physically tear the microphone from my hands. She never made it across the stage. A man in a tailored tuxedo sitting at the closest VIP table stood up and stepped directly into her path. It was my former high school advanced calculus teacher, Mr. Henderson. He did not say a word to her. He simply planted his feet, crossing his arms, and creating an immovable physical barrier between the podium and the hostile threat. Isabella halted, staring up at the man she had lied to 16 years ago. I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice to match her hysteria. I maintained the icy professional detachment of a senior partner delivering a finalized audit to a hostile board of directors. I leaned into the microphone. "My mother claims I am ungrateful," I stated, the acoustics of the ballroom carrying my voice over her frantic breathing. "She claims I am a monster for refusing to honor her sacrifices. I prefer to let the data speak for itself." Let me show you exactly what she asked me to be grateful for this past Thursday afternoon. I gave a secondary nod to the technicians in the elevated booth. The audio playback initiated. The heavy silence of the ballroom was pierced by the crisp, synthetic voice of my corporate telecommunications system. The automated greeting echoed through the surround sound speakers wrapping around the 500 guests. Calls to this firm are recorded for quality assurance and regulatory compliance. Please leave your message after the beep. A sharp electronic tone signaled the start of the recording. Every high society donor, every local politician, every country club wife heard the explicit legal warning. They all understood the parameters of the trap. Then, Isabella's voice filled the room. It was not the warm, cultured tone she utilized at charity luncheons. It was the vicious, entitled venom she reserved exclusively for her children. The digital recording stripped away all her protective layers, exposing the raw, ugly reality of her character. Evelyn, this silent treatment is unacceptable. Her recorded voice snapped, echoing off the crystal chandeliers. Sophia sent the boxes 2 days ago. I expected those VIP gala tickets in my email yesterday. You are not going to play games with me while your sister career is on the line. A collective breath hitched in the audience. The guests began to process the implications of the words. You will fix her tax problem. You will make those corporate buyers go away, and you will release those tickets immediately. The recording laid bare the anatomy of the crime. She was not asking for a familial favor. She was demanding the deliberate falsification of a corporate audit. She was actively conspiring to conceal federal wire fraud. If you do not comply, I will personally walk into that ballroom tomorrow night, take the microphone, and tell every single person in that room exactly what kind of ungrateful, vindictive daughter you really are. I will ruin you in front of your precious colleagues. Do not test me. The audio file ended with the harsh crack of a receiver slamming down. The digital waveform on the screens dissolved back into a flat, inactive line. The silence that followed was suffocating. It was the heavy, inescapable gravity of undeniable truth. Isabella stood frozen on the top step of the stage. Her mouth hung open, but she possessed no words to counter the evidence. You cannot gaslight a timestamp. You cannot manipulate a recorded confession. The weapon she had forged to destroy my evening had just detonated in her own hands. I watched the Miami elite react. These were individuals who traded in reputation. They guarded their social standing with ruthless efficiency. They observed a woman who had not only lied to them for 16 years, but was now publicly exposed as a participant in a federal financial crime. A prominent socialite sitting in the second row, a woman Isabella frequently played tennis with, placed her linen napkin on the table. She turned her chair slightly, rotating her shoulder away from the stage, deliberately turning her back on my mother. The gesture was silent, but devastating. Within seconds, a ripple effect occurred. Dozens of guests shifted their posture, breaking eye contact, refusing to look at the disgraced woman on the stairs. Isabella's social currency hit zero in a matter of heartbeats. The accounts were frozen. The bankruptcy was final. Sophia, standing alone on the ballroom floor, realized the sheer magnitude of the collateral damage. Her mother had just broadcasted her tax evasion scheme to a room containing municipal leaders and wealthy investors. Her luxury real estate career was incinerated. The fake Hermes bag slipped from her shoulder, landing softly on the carpet. She did not attempt to retrieve it. She took a step backward, shaking her head. She turned her back on her mother and sprinted toward the rear exit, pushing through the catering doors to escape the crushing judgment of the room. Isabella watched her golden child flee. The isolation was now absolute. She had alienated the daughter who built an empire, and she had been abandoned by the daughter she mortgaged her life to protect. She looked up at me. The arrogant predator was gone. The polished country club matriarch was gone. Only a hollow, bankrupt shell remained. She realized she possessed no leverage, no allies, and no escape from the consequences of her own ledger. She turned, stumbling down the 2 wooden steps, her rented gown dragging heavily behind her. She did not look at the audience. She kept her head down, navigating the narrow aisle between the tables. The sea of wealthy donors parted for her, offering a wide berth as if her disgrace were a contagious disease. She pushed through the heavy wooden doors at the back of the room, the hinges clicking shut behind her, severing her connection to Miami high society forever. I stood alone at the podium. I did not offer a secondary remark regarding her departure. The data had presented the narrative far better than any concluding insult could achieve. I simply looked out at the audience, taking a slow, deep breath of the air-conditioned air. Mr. Henderson, the calculus teacher who had blocked the stairs, turned toward the podium. He raised his hands and began to clap. The sound started slow, steady, and deliberate. The mayor, sitting at the head table, stood up and joined him. The school board president followed. Within 10 seconds, the entire ballroom was on its feet. 500 people delivered a deafening standing ovation. The applause was not merely for my corporate achievements or my philanthropic foundation. It was a visceral validation of my boundaries. They were applauding the forensic execution of a toxic liability. I accepted the heavy crystal award from the headmaster. I delivered the remainder of my prepared remarks, focusing entirely on the future, the strength of my foundation, and the importance of financial literacy for young women. I did not mention Isabella or Sophia again. Their accounts were closed. The gala transitioned into the dinner service. I spent 2 hours shaking hands, accepting congratulations, and posing for the society photographers holding my crystal trophy. My professional reputation was not only secure, it was elevated to an untouchable status. I had demonstrated grace under extreme pressure and ruthless efficiency in protecting my firm. As midnight approached, I signaled Patricia that I was ready to depart. I needed to exit before the adrenaline faded. I walked through the quiet, opulent lobby of the hotel, leaving the glittering ballroom behind. The valet was retrieving my hired car. I bypassed the bright entrance and walked toward the attached parking structure, navigating the dimly lit concrete corridors. The air smelled of exhaust and damp coastal salt. The conflict with my mother and sister was resolved. The ledgers were balanced and the receipts were filed. But as I rounded the corner toward the VIP loading zone, a shadow detached itself from a concrete pillar. A lone figure stood waiting near the exit, holding a worn baseball cap in his hands. My father, Hector, had not entered the ballroom. He had not witnessed the audio playback or the standing ovation, but he had watched his wife and his golden child flee the premises in disgrace. And now the passive enabler, the man who had funded my departure with a crumpled $50 bill, was waiting in the dark to face the auditor. The shadow detached itself from the concrete pillar as I approached the VIP loading zone. The parking structure smelled of warm asphalt and ocean salt, a heavy mixture trapped beneath the low ceilings. The yellow sodium lights buzzed, casting long, distorted shapes across the pavement. My father, Hector, stood waiting by the exit. He held a worn canvas baseball cap in his hands, turning the brim over and over between his fingers. He had not entered the grand ballroom. He had not witnessed the audio playback, the exposure of the extortion, or the standing ovation. But he had watched his wife and his golden child sprint through the hotel lobby, fleeing the premises in utter disgrace. He had seen the empire of lies collapse from the perimeter. I stopped 10 feet away from him. My hired car idled nearby, the driver waiting discreetly behind the tinted windows. Hector looked up. He appeared diminished, the posture of a man who had spent 3 decades shrinking himself to avoid his wife's unpredictable wrath had finally solidified into a permanent physical slump. The lines around his mouth were deeply etched, carrying the weight of countless unspoken objections. "Evelyn," he said. His voice cracked, a frail sound echoing against the concrete walls. I did not step forward. I did not offer a comforting embrace. I stood in my midnight blue evening gown, holding my crystal award, waiting for the passive enabler to state his business. "I am sorry," he whispered. The tears spilled over his lower eyelids, tracking through the deep wrinkles on his cheeks. They were not the calculated theatrical tears Isabella deployed to manufacture sympathy. They were the pathetic, genuine tears of a man confronting the sum total of his own cowardice. "I watched you pack those garbage bags 16 years ago," he continued, his voice shaking. "I watched her lock your door. I watched her erase you from this family, and I never said a word. I told myself I was keeping the peace. I told myself you were strong enough to survive it. But the truth is, I was just afraid. I was weak. I let her destroy you because I was too terrified to stop her." He looked down at his hands, gripping the baseball cap tight enough to turn his knuckles white. "I do not expect you to forgive me. I do not deserve it. I just needed you to know that I am sorry. I have always been proud of you." I listened to his confession. It was factually accurate. He had failed his primary biological mandate to protect his offspring. He had prioritized his own domestic comfort over my safety. But an auditor understands the difference between active malice and passive negligence. Isabella had engineered the fraud. Hector had merely looked the other way while she cooked the books. His liability was severe, but it required a different resolution. I reached into my evening clutch. My fingers brushed past the folded, yellowed graduation speech resting against the silk lining. I found the second item I had transferred from my red ledger earlier that afternoon. I pulled out a crumpled, worn piece of currency. I held the $50 bill up under the harsh yellow parking lights. The paper was incredibly soft, the edges frayed from spending 16 years pressed flat inside a cardboard binder. Abraham Lincoln, faded face, stared out at the concrete pillars. "Do you remember this?" I asked. Hector blinked, wiping a tear from his jaw. He squinted at the currency, his brow furrowing in confusion. "The morning I left for college, you slipped this into my jacket pocket," I told him. "You did not speak to me. You did not defend me. You just hid this in my coat while pretending to water the garden." He stared at the bill, realization slowly washing over his features. "You kept it." "I did not keep it as a keepsake," I clarified. "I filed it as an unpaid invoice. It was the exact measurement of your courage, $50 worth of secret guilt. I held on to this bill to remind myself that relying on you was a bad investment. You threw me a life preserver made of paper while I was drowning in the ocean." He lowered his head, accepting the harsh metric of his failure. But I continued slipping the crystal award under my arm, a life preserver delivered. 16 years late does not erase the water I swallowed. We cannot change the past. We can only settle the accounts. I gestured toward the glass double doors leading back into the hotel lobby. "There is an espresso bar in the atrium. Walk with me." Hector hesitated, then followed me through the sliding doors. The air conditioning rushed over us, a sharp contrast to the humid garage. The lobby was quiet, most of the guests still celebrating in the main ballroom. The barista behind the marble counter was wiping down the espresso machines, preparing for the late-night rush. I ordered 2 black coffees. When the barista announced the total, I handed him the worn $50 bill. He held it up to the light, checking the watermark, then processed the transaction. He handed me the change and 2 steaming cardboard cups. I passed 1 cup to my father. He took it, wrapping his calloused hands around the warm cardboard. "I used your money," I told him, looking directly into his tired eyes. "The debt is settled. The ledger between us is now at 0. He took a slow sip of the dark coffee, holding my gaze. "We can open a new account," I stated, establishing the updated framework of our relationship. "But this enterprise operates under strict regulatory compliance. Here are the terms. We start today, no favors, no borrowing money, and no mention of Isabella. If you attempt to funnel information to her or act as her proxy, the account will be permanently frozen. Do you accept these terms?" Hector nodded. He did not argue. He did not bargain for leniency. He accepted the boundaries with profound relief. I accept Evelyn. Thank you. I took my coffee and walked toward my waiting car, leaving him standing in the lobby, holding his cup. The foundational trauma was concluded. I had confronted the architect of my pain, and I had reconciled with the silent bystander. The weeks that followed executed the final arithmetic of the Rodriguez family. The federal authorities do not concern themselves with high society drama, but they are deeply invested in unpaid taxes. 21 days after the alumni gala, the FBI raided Sophia Real Estate Brokerage. They seized her servers, froze her escrow accounts, and escorted her out of the building in handcuffs. The indictment for federal wire fraud and tax evasion hit the local news networks by 5 o'clock that evening. Sophia faced a minimum of 5 years in a federal penitentiary. The luxury realtor brand was incinerated, replaced by a mugshot. The seizure of Sophia illegal income triggered the exact financial cascade I had predicted. Without the fraudulent commission checks funneled into her accounts, Isabella could no longer service the massive secondary mortgage on the suburban house. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings within 60 days. Isabella's financial collapse was spectacular and highly public. The country club suspended her membership due to delinquent dues. The women she used to play tennis with stopped answering her calls. The society peers who had witnessed her extortion attempt at the gala treated her like a radioactive liability. In the dead of night, to avoid the judgmental stares of her former neighbors, Isabella packed a rented moving truck. She abandoned the 4-bedroom house where she had spent decades curating her flawless illusion. She relocated to a small, cramped apartment in a distant suburb, entirely exiled from Miami high society. Her accounts were bankrupt. Her social currency was worthless. She was finally forced to live within the reality she had created. My firm continued to thrive. The philanthropic foundation expanded. The red ledger remained locked in my desk drawer, a closed file archived for historical reference. If you are watching this right now and you are trapped in a family that treats you like an ATM, a scapegoat, or a liability, I need you to listen very carefully. Toxic families operate on the premise of manufactured debt. They hand you an invoice for the basic biological necessities of your childhood, and they demand you pay them back with infinite gratitude, unconditional obedience, and your own hard-earned capital. They use the word family as a weapon to bypass your boundaries. They expect you to accept their abuse because they share your DNA. Do not pay fake invoices. When a manipulative parent or an entitled sibling tells you that you owe them, pull out your ledger. Audit the receipts. Look at the actual investments they made in your survival, your peace of mind, and your success. You do not owe interest on love that was never given. You do not owe loyalty to an enterprise that routinely bankrupts your mental health. If the balance sheet is negative, you have the fundamental right to close the account. You have the right to pack your bags, embrace the zero balance, and build an empire entirely on your own terms. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep their illusions warm. Become your own asset. That concludes my audit. If this story provided you with the clarity you needed today, drop a comment below and let me know how you balance your own ledgers. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with anyone who needs permission to walk away from a bad investment. I'm Evelyn Rodriguez. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time to Calm Drama Stories for another lesson in balancing the books. There is an invisible ledger kept in the heart of every family. It is not written in ink or stored on a secure digital server. It is recorded in the quiet moments around the dinner table, in the glances exchanged across a living room, and in the words spoken behind closed doors. We all carry this ledger, whether we realize it or not. Evelyn's story, a stark and chilling journey of survival and forensic detachment, forces us to look at our own balance sheets. It demands we ask a fundamental question about the nature of family in modern American culture. What exactly do we owe our parents, and what do they owe us? In a traditional family structure, the roles are supposed to be clearly defined. Parents are the architects of a child's foundation. They are tasked with providing not just the biological necessities of food and shelter, but the emotional scaffolding required to build a resilient, independent human being. The American ideal has long championed the concept of the self-made individual. Yet that independence is meant to be nurtured from a place of unconditional support. Isabella Rodriguez fundamentally corrupted this ideal. She viewed motherhood not as a sacred responsibility, but as a high-interest loan. She treated her children as extensions of her own ego, accessories designed to elevate her status at the country club. When parenting becomes transactional, the family ceases to be a safe harbor and transforms into a hostile corporate environment. Isabella demanded a return on an investment she never truly made. She expected Evelyn to pay her back in the currency of subservience, endless gratitude, and eventually, literal financial bailouts. This is the danger of raising children without emotional awareness. When a parent lacks the ability to separate their own unfulfilled ambitions from their child's identity, they inevitably begin to consume the child. Evelyn was punished not because she was a failure, but because her brilliant, self-directed success threatened Isabella's fragile narrative of control. A parent who requires a child to stay small so they can feel large is not raising a family. They are managing hostages. But the tragedy of the Rodriguez family does not begin and end with Isabella's narcissism. It extends to the devastating consequences of lacking honesty and fairness in how children are treated. We often look at the scapegoat, the child who is cast out and locked in their room, as the primary victim. Yet Evelyn's story reveals the profound damage inflicted upon the favored child. Sophia was handed luxury vehicles, lavish weddings, and unconditional praise without ever being required to demonstrate character, integrity, or a basic work ethic. By shielding Sophia from reality and rewarding her mediocrity, Isabella crippled her golden child. Sophia was never taught the value of honest labor or the importance of ethical boundaries. She was raised in a house of mirrors where appearances were valued above truth. When Sophia eventually stumbled into the real world, she lacked the internal compass required to navigate it. Her descent into federal wire fraud and tax evasion was not an anomaly. It was the direct, inevitable result of a childhood devoid of accountability. In attempting to orchestrate Sophia's perfect life, Isabella engineered her absolute destruction. Fairness in parenting does not mean treating every child exactly the same, but it does mean holding them to the same standards of honesty and moral responsibility. And then there is Hector, the passive enabler. In many traditional American households, there is a quiet tolerance for the spouse who keeps their head down to avoid conflict. Hector represents the insidious nature of silent complicity. It is incredibly easy to condemn the active abuser, the mother who screams in the foyer or locks the bedroom door. It is far more uncomfortable to confront the father who stands by the garden hose and watches it happen. Hector knew the ledger was unbalanced. He knew his wife was acting with profound cruelty. Yet he chose the preservation of his own domestic comfort over the psychological safety of his daughter. The crumpled $50 bill he slipped into Evelyn's pocket was a monument to his moral cowardice. It was an acknowledgement of the crime without the courage to stop it. Raising children requires bravery. It requires the willingness to stand up to your own partner when they cross the line into emotional abuse. A parent who refuses to protect their child from the toxicity within their own home is just as culpable as the one inflicting the damage. Hector's belated apology in the concrete parking garage serves as a haunting reminder that a life preserver thrown 16 years too late is a tragedy, not a rescue. Evelyn's triumph is spectacular precisely because it is so rare. She utilized the pain of her rejection to forge an impenetrable armor of self-reliance. She learned to audit her emotions, stripping away the societal guilt that dictates we must endlessly forgive those who share our bloodline. We share these narratives because the shadows of Isabella, Sophia, and Hector exist in neighborhoods across the country. If you found a reflection of your own life in Evelyn's red binder, you are not alone. It takes immense strength to recognize when a family dynamic is bankrupt, and even more strength to stop trying to balance an unfixable account. We invite you to join our community of survivors and storytellers. Follow the channel Look Vengeance, hit the subscribe button, and share your own experiences in the comments below. We are building a space where the truth is never locked in a bedroom or thrown in the trash. As the dust settles on the Miami beachfront and the federal indictments are filed, a lingering question remains. Evelyn zeroed out the ledger. She closed the accounts and established her boundaries. But when you spend your formative years learning to view love as a fraudulent transaction, how do you ever learn to trust a genuine investment? The red binder may be locked away in a desk drawer, the math perfectly settled, but the echo of the empty graduation chair never truly fades. We can balance the books, we can secure the perimeter, and we can survive. But as you look in your own mirror tonight, ask yourself this. When the audit is finally over and the debts are wiped clean, what is left in the vault?